"I'm sorry," he said. "But you can trust me on this. Everything will turn out fine." "How can I trust you?" Natalia asked with tears in her eyes. "My friend Brett is very powerful, and I've heard about Malcolm. He's a good person. He'll be reasonable." "Why is he even saying these things?" Natalia thought. Instead of cheering her up, Frazer's words made her feel worse. "I don't care how powerful Brett is. He can't go against Princess Sophie. And no matter how good a person Malcolm is, we still have to deal with his wife." "Trust me," Frazer said again, giving his wife a determined look. Natalia wiped her tears. "I don't trust him," she thought. "But what's done is done, and we can't back out now." She took a deep breath. "Okay," she said, turning to Sophie. "I accept your challenge." "Oh, how sweet," Sophie said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look how deep your relationship is. I think I'm going to cry." She grinned maliciously. "I can't believe you actually fell for what he told you," she said, cackling like a villain in a fairy tale. "I'm not afraid of you," Natalia replied. Sophie glared at her. "I'm going to trample her dignity so hard," she thought. "She doesn't think she's afraid of me, but she should be." The atmosphere in the dining room had become tense. In some ways, it was reminiscent of the anticipation on New Year's Eve, when the countdown until midnight brought a new chapter of unexpected things. A waiter offered Natalia and Sheila some seats. As they sat down, Natalia grasped Sheila's hand for support. I was too impulsive, Natalia realized. Although she had called Brett to let him know what had happened, she had no idea what to do next. Frazer had been in the bathroom for a while, and she didn't have anyone else to help her. People around the room began scoffing at Natalia. "When are you going to wake up and realize your husband is useless? Look how long he's been hiding in the bathroom," Sheila whispered. "Maybe you should go home. I'll treat you to this meal another day," Natalia offered. "What kind of person do you take me for?" Sheila asked with a smile. "This restaurant was worth the wait. Don't fight me over it." Sophie burst into laughter. "You two are so optimistic. I hope you still feel that way after you wipe the floor for me," she said. "Miss Laplace, do you know how little I respect you? I called 8 different companies, including Balance Enterprise, Foxtrot Technology, and Lightning Electronics, and they all expressed deep concern for your reputation and sincerity in business deals." "Where's your husband?" Natalia asked, trying to change the subject. "Malcolm? Oh, he'll be here when he's good and ready. He'd never run away and hide like yours," Sophie replied sarcastically. "Really? How pathetic can someone be? I can't believe your husband is still hiding in the bathroom." Several onlookers muttered agreements and laughed. However, everyone fell silent as the doors burst open. A burly man stepped through. Although he was missing an arm, no one could mistake him for being weak. He had an imposing presence that made everyone take a step back. He took off his sunglasses, revealing a long, narrow scar across one eye. Several people gasped in shock. He looked around the room, noticing that over a dozen people were standing by the door. He waved his hand around the room as he said, "My dear, I didn't realize this place was so lively. No wonder you always mentioned wanting to eat here." As the crowd looked between him and Sophie, they realized he must be her husband, Malcolm. One of the patrons, a man in a plaid shirt, laughed and said, "That good-for-nothing Frazer pissed his pants when he heard you were coming. He's been hiding in the bathroom ever since." A few people smiled, but before anyone else could laugh, Malcolm stepped forward and swung his fist. The man in plaid crumpled without another word. Everyone stared in shock. Natalia gripped Sheila's arm tightly out of fright. Malcolm is even more unreasonable than Sophie, she realized. You talk too much, Malcolm said, as he sneered at the unconscious man on the floor. He looked up at the people standing around. Get him out of here, he instructed. Several people rushed forward and grabbed the man off the floor. They were eager to leave the room. Watching the drama play out wasn't worth facing Malcolm's wrath. Just as they left, Frazer entered the room. What did I miss? He asked. After using the bathroom, he made a few calls until he finally persuaded Prescott to help him. Natalia wanted to warn Frazer to run away, but words failed her when she opened her mouth to speak. The pressure made her freeze. Sophie faced Malcolm. Honey, this is the man that said you were very reasonable. He wanted to talk to you, she explained. Oh, Malcolm said, squinting at Frazer as if trying to remember him. What does he want to talk to me about? Before Sophie could respond, Frazer stepped forward. Take your wife and your men and leave. I won't pursue this matter any further. The crowd was shocked once again. They wondered if Frazer had his head on straight. He was clearly outnumbered. Malcolm snorted. Do you have a death wish? He asked. He stepped forward menacingly, only to be interrupted by his phone ringing. Who is this? He snapped as he answered it, annoyed at the interruption. It's Ryan. Don't worry about the guy at the restaurant. Just come here. Who's trying to bargain with me now? Malcolm grumbled as he hung up. Before he could slide his phone back into his pocket, his phone rang again. Who is it? He asked again. It's Frankie. You can't afford to offend the people at Mayday. Leave the restaurant and come to Lucky's Pub. You're no better than Ryan, trying to order me around, Malcolm complained before hanging up. When his phone rang a third time, he had to resist the urge to throw it across the room. What? He snapped. This is Prescott. I work for Hugh. If you want revenge for losing your arm, you should come and meet me at Lucky's Pub. Prescott hung up before Malcolm could respond. Malcolm's fingers trembled at the offer. Hugh was the one who had hurt Malcolm's arm, and it was one of his men who had almost blinded him. But unable to get revenge, Malcolm had been biding his time and building his strength until an opportunity arose for revenge. Now, 3 different people were telling him to leave the restaurant and go to Lucky's Pub. For the first time, he considered going. Something important must be going on there, he thought. He looked around the room and decided no one there was worth his time. He turned to leave. Where are you going? Sophie cried out. I have something more important to do. You can handle this, he replied, as his men followed him. Natalia let out a relieved sigh. The remaining bystanders looked at each other in confusion. They were wondering how Frazer had gotten away with speaking so recklessly to Malcolm's face. Instead of panicking, Sophie rolled her eyes in irritation. Although she would have preferred to see Frazer and Natalia humiliated, destroying a company was more important. Right on cue, Sophie's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and smiled. Natalia, don't you think you should check in on your company right now? She asked. Natalia gave her a quizzical expression. What's going on? She wondered. Frazer interrupted her train of thought as he said, Sophie, don't you think you should answer your phone? Don't tell me you're getting lazy. I wouldn't talk trash if I were you, Sophie said. If you want to humiliate your wife, that's fine by me. Expecting good news, she called her assistant back, placing her phone on speaker. Natalia's stomach dropped, afraid of whatever news had made Sophie so confident. Ma'am, we're in trouble. We lost our key investment, her assistant exclaimed. What happened? Sophie shrieked, nearly dropping her phone. Their key investment was the capital for 8 companies, all of which would be destroyed if it was lost. "I can't explain over the phone. You should come back," her assistant replied, sounding like she was on the brink of tears. Sophie had been full of confidence that they would be able to destroy Frandotech and the Robster Corporation if they invested enough money. In her determination, she had invested far more than she had originally planned. Now she might lose everything. She shot one last glare at Natalia before storming out. Natalia and the crowd watched her go in puzzlement and surprise, as several well-timed phone calls had made both her and her husband leave. The people in the restaurant were at a loss for what to do. In a short period of time, a menacing gangster and a powerful businesswoman had caused a scene and promptly stormed out. It felt like a scene out of a television show. Natalia shook her head as if to wake herself from a dream. What just happened?" she asked. Although the question was meant to be rhetorical, Sheila answered. "Malcolm and Sophie threatened us and bolted after getting some interesting phone calls." Sheila knew better than to look a gift horse in the mouth. "Let's go," she said to Natalia, "just in case that crazy woman comes back." Content not to waste any more time, Frazer, Natalia, and Sheila rushed out of the restaurant. When Dorothy got home, Natalia had just finished getting ready for bed. Dorothy lightly knocked on her daughter's door. "Are you asleep?" she asked. "Not yet," Natalia replied. A second later, Frazer opened the bedroom door. Dorothy automatically glared at her son-in-law. Although Natalia and Frazer had been married for several years, Dorothy didn't like that they slept together under the same roof as her. Despite her urge to verbally remind him about how useless she thought he was, she had more important things to focus on. She brushed past him and sat on the bed next to Natalia. "Can you do me a favor?" she asked gently. Natalia sat up. It had been so long since her mother had spoken to her in a kind voice. She was curious. "Sure, Mom. What do you need?" Dorothy smiled. "I knew I could count on you," she said. "Your Aunt Mellie called and said she and her husband want to come for a visit. Can you pick 'em up tomorrow?" Natalia sighed and rubbed her face. "Oh, I'm so busy at work. I'm not sure I have the time." "But I already promised her that you would pick them up," Dorothy admitted. "Why would you do that?" Natalia asked, frowning. "Is there something I should know?" Dorothy fell silent for a moment before explaining that she had promised Mellie that Natalia would personally attend to her because she wanted to rub Natalia's position as CEO in Mellie's face. She hadn't expected Mellie to immediately book a ticket in an attempt to prove she was lying. Dorothy had overplayed her hand. Although Natalia's promotion at work was real, their current living conditions didn't reflect such a prestigious position yet. Mellie would be sure to point that out to them at every chance. Natalia groaned after hearing her mother's confession. "Oh, Mom, why would you do that?" she asked. Implying that Natalia owned a company was stretching the truth. She was a CEO, but she still worked under Brett. She was already combating rumors at work that she had only gotten the position because of him. She was constantly trying to go above and beyond to prove she had earned her place fairly. Her mother had just added more to her plate by promising her time to someone else. "Too bad Aunt Mellie won't leave until she feels like she's one-upped my mom in some way," she thought. "Come on," Dorothy pleaded. "Technically, I didn't lie. I just wanted to show her how nicely we were doing after how horrible she was to us at the New Year's Eve party." "I guess I'll just stay late after work," Natalia thought while sighing. "Fine, I'll do it," she said. Dorothy smiled at her, not registering Natalia's worn-out expression. "Why don't I just pick her up?" Frazer suggested. "You? Don't be ridiculous. If anything, it's better if you don't show your face at all while she's here," Dorothy protested loudly.
Besides, you already have a job to do tomorrow. You don't want to bail on your friend, Natalia added.
Brett doesn't have anything arranged for tomorrow, so I can take his car to pick up Aunt Mellie and her husband, he answered. His wife and mother-in-law didn't know he was the car's true owner. Dorothy's face lit up as she inquired what kind of car it was. Her jaw dropped at his answer.
Isn't that worth almost a fortune? She asked.
He nodded in response. She clapped her hands together and smiled.
Oh, I've heard enough. That'll be more than enough to put Mellie in her place.
As far as Frazer could remember, it was the first time he and his mother-in-law had agreed about anything. Nonetheless, Natalia didn't think using a company car for family drama was appropriate. He noticed her worry and rubbed her arm comfortingly. Don't worry. Brett won't mind, he assured her. Dorothy, however, was less concerned about their jobs and was more worried about making sure he didn't embarrass her in front of Mellie. She demanded that he join her in the living room so she could break down in detail what he should say and do the following day. He listened patiently as if preparing for a job interview. The following morning, Natalia left for work on time, while Dorothy stood in the kitchen with Frazer.
You remember everything I told you last night, right? She asked him.
He nodded. Don't worry. I can handle this, he replied. She nodded and left the kitchen. When he finished the dishes from breakfast, he tidied the house before driving to the bus station to pick up Mellie and her husband. He parked in the parking lot and lingered in the lobby of the bus station while he waited for them to arrive. When they approached, he reached to help with their bags. Hello, how was the trip? He asked as they stood before him. Mellie gave him a look of disdain.
I thought Natalia was picking us up. Where is she? She asked.
Her husband, Cyrus, frowned.
It looks like Dorothy was over-promising and under-delivering, like always. She sent you here to try and get us to go home, didn't she? He asked.
Frazer had to resist the urge to roll his eyes. I'll explain on the way. How about we get in the car? He said. Cyrus and Mellie both scoffed.
Are you still driving that piece of junk hand-me-down from Hostess? She asked.
Frazer pretended not to notice her tone. I was going to bring that car today, but Natalia insisted we bring the new car since it has more space, he replied.
New car? Mellie thought. New to them, maybe. It's probably just another used junker.
Mellie waved her hand dismissively.
Don't bother. We'll just take a taxi to the mall and walk around for a bit before booking a ticket back, she said.
As far as she was concerned, she had already been let down twice in 5 minutes. She wasn't interested in visiting Dorothy and Natalia any longer. Are you sure? Frazer asked. Cyrus and Mellie both nodded before pulling out their cell phones to call a taxi. Okay. Frazer shrugged and began walking back to the parking lot. Mellie watched him, feeling unimpressed.
He didn't even bother trying to convince us to stay, she thought.
But her train of thought was derailed as she saw him unlock a luxury vehicle.
When did they start being able to afford a car like that? She wondered. Wait! She shouted.
She rushed over and stood in the way of the car so he couldn't drive away. What do you want? He asked.
Don't use that tone with me, she snapped impulsively.
Then she remembered the car sitting in front of her. She plastered on a fake smile.
I thought you were supposed to welcome us, she added.
He looked at her with an expectant expression. Eventually, she would get around to saying what she wanted.
Is this really your new car?
She asked as Cyrus approached them. He nodded. Cyrus began excitedly listing off the unique specifications of the luxury vehicle, which annoyed Mellie. Her face twisted into an expression that made it look like she had bitten a lemon.
You don't know how to appreciate a car like this, she said to Frazer. You should let me try it.
Remembering Dorothy's specific instructions to cater to his sister, he got out of the car. "This car has different handling than most cars," he warned her.
"Maybe you should let me drive. You can sit in the passenger seat," he offered.
She scoffed and ignored him. Not wanting to be blamed for not giving her what she wanted, he passed her the keys. Cyrus hopped into the passenger seat, excited to take the car for a joyride. She gently ran her hands across the steering wheel leather, savoring the rare opportunity to be behind such a luxurious vehicle. Despite Frazer's warning, she started the car and slowly drove around the parking lot. He sighed and settled on a bench in front of the bus station. While he sat scrolling through his phone, he expected them to take a turn around the block and come back. Half an hour later, they still hadn't returned.
Did they really ditch me here?
He wondered with disbelief. Just as he was about to call a taxi, he received a call from an unknown number.
"Is this Mr. Malcolmore?" a man asked.
"Yes," he replied.
"Could you please come to Main Street? Your car went over the median."
"I'll be right there."
He hung up and called a taxi.
"Oh, I knew I shouldn't have let her drive," he thought.
20 minutes later, Frazer arrived at Main Street. He saw the car had a few scratches on the front bumper, but otherwise nothing and no one else seemed to be harmed. Cyrus and Melly were standing stiffly next to the car, their faces pale.
"Hello, I'm Frazer Macklemore,"
he said as he approached the police officer. "You got lucky. Nothing was damaged besides some grass, so you don't have to worry about paying for the destruction of public property. It's up to you to file a report for your insurance," the officer informed him. Frazer sighed. He couldn't file a claim for a car without revealing to his family that the car was actually his.
"I'm not going to file a report.
"Thank you, though," he replied. The officer nodded. "All right. Just be more careful about whom you lend your car to in the future." The officer got back in his car and drove away.
"How much will it cost to repair?"
Melly asked. "Are you offering to pay for the damage you caused?" Frazer asked. She scoffed.
"Absolutely not. It's your car. Whatever happens to it is your responsibility," she said.
"So, you're just going to pretend like you wouldn't have thrown me under the bus if I didn't let you drive?" he thought. Frustration filled him. He didn't want to upset Natalia's family members, but their reckless driving irritated him. This time it had been a curb. The next time it would be a person. He wouldn't put it past them to commit a hit and run. "You ditched me at the bus station. I wasn't even there for the accident," he replied.
"You were the one who let me drive the car to begin with. You can't blame me now that something has happened," she said with conviction. "Besides, Natalia is a CEO now. Are you really saying she can't afford to fix some scratches?" she added.
He pinched the bridge of his nose and took a deep breath in frustration. He knew it was a waste of energy, oxygen, and time to argue with such an unreasonable person.
"All right.
I still have some errands to run, so I'll call a taxi for you. I'll meet you at the house," he said. He was tired of dealing with them. Once they were in the taxi, he went to find Ryan to discuss his cooperation with Frankie. When Frazer returned home that afternoon, he was surprised to find only Dorothy home, watching the television in the living room.
"Where is Aunt Melly?"
he asked.
"Gone,"
she replied without looking at him. He looked at her in confusion.
"Gone? But I called them a taxi,"
he thought with bewilderment. She muted the television and stood up.
"What is wrong with you? All you had to do was pick them up. I gave you very specific instructions. Why can't you complete just a simple task?"
Her voice grew louder with each complaint.
"I don't understand. What's going on?" he asked. "You don't understand?"
she snapped before scoffing.
"You didn't show up, so they went home. I know they can be a bit frustrating, but they're still family. I can't believe you left them waiting at the station for 2 hours."
Aunt Melly went home to ensure she wouldn't have to pay for the car accident.
She lied about me not showing up because she knew they wouldn't believe me, he realized.
Hey guys, Frazer here. Listen to the full episode of Unraveling the Son-In-Law exclusively on Pocket FM app. Click the link in description to install the app now.